Captain Lee Minho stared through the bridge windows of the exploration ship Taigok as it drifted through what should have been bustling space. Instead of the busy trade routes and colony ships they expected to find, there was nothing but silence and emptiness stretching in all directions. "Another dead station ahead, Captain," said Navigator Kim Hannah, her voice barely above a whisper. The crew had started speaking quietly over the past few days, as if loud voices might disturb whatever ghosts haunted this region of space. This was the 23rd abandoned structure they had discovered in 2 weeks. Massive space stations that could house millions of people sat dark and lifeless, their lights long since burned out. Some still had atmosphere and working gravity, but no signs of life anywhere. Communications Officer Park Jisoo turned from her console with worried eyes. "Sir, I'm picking up those automated signals again. Same pattern as before, broadcasting on multiple frequencies. Can you make sense of any of it yet?" Minho asked, though he already knew the answer. "Partially, sir. The mathematical patterns help with translation, but the languages are completely unknown. What I can understand keeps mentioning something called the Hunters and warnings about the endless dark. The messages have been repeating for over 200 years. Science Officer Choi Yoon-ho looked up from his data tablets, his face pale with exhaustion. For days he had been analyzing the strange architecture and technology they found on each abandoned station. "Captain, we need to talk privately." Minho followed Yoon-ho to his small laboratory behind the bridge. The walls were covered with photographs and scans of alien technology, all far more advanced than anything humanity had ever built. "This is impossible," Yoon-ho said, pointing at a holographic display showing the internal structure of one of the stations. "Look at these power systems. They're using controlled fusion reactions that shouldn't be possible with any known physics. Their manufacturing techniques could build something this size in months instead of decades. But they're all empty," Minho said. "That's what scares me. Captain, I've analyzed debris patterns, atmospheric readings, even the dust accumulation. These weren't destroyed by war or disaster. They were evacuated, quickly, but carefully. Like everyone just picked up and left at the same time." Minho studied the data. "How many different species are we talking about?" "From what I can tell from the different architectural styles and equipment designs, at least dozens, maybe hundreds. All working together, all leaving together." Yoon-ho pulled up star charts showing their exploration route. "And sir, this isn't just a few systems. Based on the signal patterns we're detecting, this evacuation zone covers thousands of star systems, maybe tens of thousands." The captain felt a chill run down his spine. An entire region of the galaxy, just abandoned. "It gets worse. I've been studying the warning beacons more carefully. They're not just broadcasting randomly. They're positioned in a specific pattern, like a warning network." And Captain Yoon-ho hesitated. "They're all pointing outward, away from something deeper in this region." Before Minho could respond, alarms started ringing throughout the ship. Both men rushed back to the bridge where the crew was staring at their screens in shock. "Captain, you need to see this," Park Jisoo said, her voice shaking. "We just intercepted a signal from the deep space monitoring station on Earth. They're detecting massive gravitational disturbances at the edge of our galaxy. Something big is moving. In the dark space between galaxies." Navigator Kim Hannah pulled up long-range sensor readings. "Sir, if these readings are correct, whatever's out there is bigger than anything we've ever imagined. The gravitational signatures suggest artificial structures the size of small moons." Minho looked around at his crew, seeing his own fear reflected in their faces. "How long until whatever it is reaches the outer colonies?" "At current speed, maybe 6 months," Hannah replied quietly. The bridge fell silent, except for the soft hum of the ship's engines and the distant crackling of the ancient warning beacons. Yoon-ho finally spoke what everyone was thinking. "Captain, what if the evacuation wasn't finished? What if whoever lived here ran out of time? Through the windows, another abandoned station drifted past, its empty windows like dead eyes staring back at them. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, automated voices continued their 200-year-old warnings about hunters and endless darkness, broadcasting to anyone foolish enough to enter this graveyard of civilizations. Minho realized that humanity had stumbled into something far beyond their understanding. They were small children who had wandered into an empty battlefield, not knowing that the war was about to begin again. Set course for the nearest station with intact archives, he ordered. We need to understand what happened here before whatever scared away these civilizations comes back. As the Taigok changed direction toward the massive structure ahead, none of the crew noticed the faint energy readings beginning to appear at the very edge of their long-range sensors. Something was indeed coming back to reclaim this empty region of space, and humanity was directly in its path. The galaxy had fled in fear 2 centuries ago. Now it was time to discover why. 3 months after the discovery of the abandoned sector, Colony Administrator Song Minji walked through the corridors of what had once been called Station Harmony. The massive structure now served as humanity's first permanent settlement in the empty region, and every day brought new surprises about what the previous inhabitants had left behind. The numbers still don't make sense to me, she said to Dr. Kong Jiho, who was studying alien symbols on the wall displays. This single station could house 20 million people, but we found evidence of thousands more just like it. Ji looked up from his translation work, his eyes tired but excited. That's because we're not dealing with a single civilization, Administrator. I've identified at least 300 different architectural styles, writing systems, and technological approaches just in this sector alone. They entered what appeared to be a vast library, though instead of books, the walls were covered with crystalline storage devices that hummed with barely contained energy. Each crystal could store more information than all of Earth's computers combined. I've been working with the translation computers for weeks, Jiho continued, activating one of the crystals. Holographic displays filled the air around them, showing star maps, historical records, and images of dozens of different alien species. They called themselves the Convergence. Not just one species, but a partnership of over 40,000 different kinds of intelligent life. Song Minji stared at the holographic aliens floating around her. Some looked almost human, while others were so strange she couldn't understand how they even moved or communicated. 40,000 species? That's impossible. I thought so too, until I started reading their history files. They'd been working together for over 50,000 years. No wars, no conflicts over resources, no territorial disputes. They had solved every problem that usually destroys civilizations. Communications specialist Nam Suyang entered the library, carrying a portable computer covered with blinking lights. Dr. Kong, I've finished analyzing the manufacturing facilities. In Section 7, you're not going to believe what they could build. She activated her computer, showing 3-dimensional blueprints of incredible machines. They could manipulate matter at the atomic level. Need a new spaceship? They could grow one from basic elements in a few days. Need a new planet? They had machines that could move asteroids and build worlds from scratch. Jiho nodded, pulling up more records. According to these files, they had eliminated poverty, hunger, disease, even natural death for most species. Their technology could repair any injury, cure any sickness, even restore memories lost to old age. Song Minji felt overwhelmed. If they had all this, if they lived in paradise, why did they leave? That's what I've been trying to figure out, Jiho said, his expression growing dark. The historical records are very detailed about their achievements, but they become strange when they talk about something called the cyclical warning. He activated another crystal, and the holographic displays changed to show what looked like astronomical charts. Strange symbols marked certain time periods, and all of them seemed to point toward the same conclusion. Every few 100,000 years, something happens. The records call it the time of departure. All the previous galactic civilizations before the convergence faced the same event, and when it comes, every intelligent species has the same choice, which is Song, Minji asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. Run or die. According to these records, in the entire history of the galaxy, no civilization has ever chosen to fight. They all evacuated to other galaxies or the empty regions between stars. Nam Su-Yang pulled up technical specifications on her computer. But sir, their weapons technology was incredible. They had ships that could destroy entire solar systems, energy shields that could protect whole planets, and defensive networks that spanned thousands of star systems. What could possibly scare people with this kind of power? Jiho was quiet for a long moment, studying the alien text, scrolling across his displays. I don't know yet, but I found something in the deeper archives that worries me. The convergence. Scientists spent their last 50 years studying whatever threatens the galaxy every few 100,000 years. They were trying to find a way to fight it, instead of running. Did they succeed? Song Mingi asked. I don't think so. The research files stopped suddenly, and the evacuation records show they left in a hurry. But, Administrator, here's what really scares me. Jiho pulled up a temporal chart showing cycles of galactic history. Based on their calculations, the next time of departure should happen approximately 200 years after the convergence evacuation. Song Minji felt her blood turn cold. That's now. You're saying it should be happening now. Before anyone could respond, alarms started ringing throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed, and the voice of Captain Lee Minho crackled over the communication system from his ship in orbit. All stations were detecting massive energy signatures, approaching from deep space. Whatever the convergence was running from, I think it's coming back. In the library, surrounded by the accumulated knowledge of 40,000 species, 3 humans stared at each other with the growing realization that they had stumbled into something far beyond their understanding. The galaxy's greatest civilizations had chosen to abandon paradise itself rather than face what was coming, and now humanity stood directly in its path, with nowhere left to run. Dr. Kong Jiho had not slept for 2 days straight. His eyes burned as he stared at the massive computer screens in the deepest part of the Convergence Archive facility. After weeks of failed attempts, he had finally broken through the security systems protecting the most classified information the alien civilization had left behind. What he found made him wish he had never succeeded. Administrator Song, you need to get down here immediately. He called over the communication system, his voice shaking with exhaustion and fear. 20 minutes later, Song Mingi arrived in the archive chamber to find Jiho surrounded by holographic displays showing star charts, mathematical equations, and what looked like invasion patterns stretching across the entire galaxy. I cracked their central database, Jiho said, without looking up from his work. The deepest files, the ones they tried to hide even from their own people. I know why the convergence evacuated. The holographic displays shifted, showing images that made Song Minji step backward in shock. Dark shapes moved through space, but they didn't look like any ships she had ever seen. They seemed to bend light around them, creating holes in reality itself. They called it the cyclical cleansing, Jiho continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Every 300 to 500,000 years, something comes from the empty space between galaxies. The convergence scientists spent decades studying historical records, and they found evidence of this happening many times before. What kind of something? Song Minji asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. They called them the But Administrator, they don't just destroy civilizations like a normal enemy would. According to these files, they consume the very idea of intelligence itself. Jiho activated another display, showing scientific studies that hurt to look at. When the Devourers finish with a world, it doesn't just become empty, it becomes permanently dead. Evolution on those planets never again produces intelligent life. Something in the planetary environment becomes poisoned against consciousness itself. That's impossible, Song Minji said, but her voice lacked conviction. The Convergence's best scientists thought so too, until they studied planets that had been touched by previous cleansings. Worlds that should have developed intelligent species over millions of years, but never did. The scientists theorized that the Devourers exist partially outside normal space and time, feeding on what they called quantum consciousness patterns. The holographic displays showed mathematical models that were too complex for Song Mingi to understand. But the conclusions were clear enough. The Devourers didn't just kill intelligent beings. They erased the possibility of intelligence ever existing again. How many times has this happened? She asked. At least for complete galactic civilizations before the Convergence. Each one more advanced than the last. Each one choosing to flee rather than fight. Jiho pulled up temporal charts showing the regular pattern of galactic emptying and repopulation. The galaxy goes through cycles. Intelligent life develops, grows, builds great civilizations, and then the Devourers return to start the process over again. But some species survived by running away. Yes, but barely. The Convergence found evidence that only about 1% of each galactic population manages to escape to other galaxies or the empty regions between stars. The rest, Jiho gestured at the mathematical projections showing consumption rates, gone completely. Song Minji felt sick as she studied the data. Did any civilization ever try to fight them? That's what's so terrifying. According to these records, a few tried. The previous galactic civilization had weapons that could destroy entire star systems, defensive technology that could hide whole planets, and they coordinated the resistance of over 60,000 species. What happened to them? Complete extinction. Within 6 months. The Devourers adapted to every weapon, bypassed every defense, and consumed every consciousness. Not a single survivor. Before Song Minji could respond, alarms began ringing throughout the facility. The voice of communications specialist Nam Suyang crackled over the intercom system, filled with panic. Administrator, we're detecting massive gravitational disturbances at the galactic rim. Long range sensors are picking up objects moving out of dark space. The energy signatures match the theoretical models for the entities described in the Convergence archives. Jiho's face went completely pale as he pulled up real-time sensor data on his displays. The readings showed objects larger than moons moving at impossible speeds toward the galaxy's inhabited regions. According to the Convergence timeline, he said quietly, we should have had another 50 years before they returned. But the calculations were estimates based on incomplete data. Song Minji stared at the approaching energy signatures on the sensor displays. Each one represented a Devourer ship, and there were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. How long do we have? She asked. At their current speed, they'll reach the outer human colonies in approximately 60 days. Earth itself, ... Jiho checked his calculations twice. 4 months. The administrator looked around at the vast archive chamber, filled with the accumulated knowledge of 40,000 species. All of this wisdom, all of these achievements, abandoned by their creators, rather than used to fight. Dr. Kung, is there any record of what makes these things vulnerable? Any weakness the Convergence discovered? Jiho was quiet for a long moment, scrolling through terabytes of research data. They were working on something in their final years. Some kind of theoretical weakness in the Devourer consciousness structure. But the research was never completed. Why not? Because they ran out of time and chose to evacuate instead. Jiho looked directly at her, his expression grim. The question is, what will humanity choose? Through the facility's windows, the stars looked peaceful and welcoming. But somewhere in that darkness, ancient horrors were returning to claim the galaxy once again. Captain Lee Minho stood in the command center of the hastily converted warship Dokta, watching holographic displays that showed the approaching Devourer fleet. The alien ships looked nothing like human vessels. They were organic in shape, twisted, and dark, seeming to swallow light rather than reflect it. Earth Command is ordering immediate evacuation of all colonies, reported Colonel Udaon, reading from his communication tablet. They want every human ship to retreat beyond the galactic rim within 30 days. And go where? Admiral Park Yoon-bi asked from the main display screen. Her face showed the exhaustion of someone who had been planning humanity's defense for weeks, without sleep. If these things have destroyed every previous galactic civilization, running away just means we die slower. Around the command table, humanity's military leaders studied tactical displays that showed impossible odds. The Devourer fleet outnumbered human forces by thousands to one, and their individual ships were each the size of Earth's largest space stations. The computer simulations all show the same result, said strategic analyst Kim Soo-yoon, pulling up battle projections. Complete human defeat within 72 hours of first contact. Our weapons can't penetrate their defenses, and their technology is so far beyond ours that fighting them would be like throwing rocks at a battleship. Dr. Kang Ji-ho burst through the command center doors, carrying a portable data storage unit, and looking more excited than anyone had seen him in weeks. Wait, don't make any evacuation decisions yet. I found something in the deepest convergence archives. Captain Minho turned to face him. What kind of something? The convergence was researching Devourer weaknesses during their final 50 years. They discovered that these creatures process consciousness through quantum entanglement networks. Essentially, they're a hive mind that feeds by absorbing and digesting the thought patterns of intelligent species. Colonel, you frowned. That doesn't sound like good news. But here's the important part, Ji-ho continued, activating his data unit to show brain scan patterns. The Devourers have evolved over millions of years to consume orderly, logical, predictable thought processes, the kind of thinking that highly advanced, peaceful civilizations develop over thousands of years. Admiral Park leaned forward on the display screen. What are you saying, Doctor? I'm saying that human consciousness might be naturally resistant to their consumption process. We're too chaotic, too emotional, too unpredictable. Our tendency to make irrational decisions, to act on emotion rather than pure logic, to sacrifice ourselves for others, even when it makes no sense, ... Ji-ho smiled for the first time in days. These aren't weaknesses. They're weapons. Strategic analyst Kim studied the research data. Are you telling us that being illogical is an advantage? More than that, I believe human irrationality creates something like cognitive poison for the devourer hive mind. They can't process consciousness patterns that don't follow predictable rules. When they try to absorb chaotic human thoughts, it creates feedback loops that damage their collective intelligence. Captain Minho looked around the room at his officers. So our plan is to be as human as possible. Our plan is to turn every piece of abandoned convergence technology into a weapon and fight these things using tactics they can't predict or understand. Ji-ho replied. The convergence left behind manufacturing facilities that can build weapons more powerful than anything Earth has ever produced. But instead of using logical military strategies, we fight like humans. Colonel, you still looked doubtful. Doctor, even if you're right about our resistance to their consciousness attacks, they still have ships the size of cities and weapons that can destroy planets. Which is why we don't fight them ship to ship, Admiral Park said, understanding beginning to show in her eyes. We turn the abandoned megastructures into weapons platforms. We use convergence technology with human tactics. Exactly, Ji-ho nodded. Instead of organized battle formations, we use chaos. Instead of logical strategies, we rely on intuition and emotional decisions. We make choices that don't make sense, even to ourselves. Communications Officer Park Jisoo's voice crackled over the intercom system. Command Center, we're receiving signals from the outer sensor networks. The Devourer advanced scouts have entered the galaxy. First contact estimated in 48 hours. The command center fell silent as everyone processed the reality that humanity's survival would soon depend on embracing everything that other species might consider weaknesses. Captain Minho stood up, his decision crystallizing. Send word to all human colonies and ships. We're not evacuating. We're making our stand here, using every piece of alien technology we can find. Sir, Colonel, you protested. The odds of survival are practically zero. The odds don't matter, Minho replied. Looking out at the stars, where ancient convergence weapons platforms drifted like sleeping giants. Sometimes the most human thing you can do is refuse to accept the impossible. If we're going to die, we'll do it fighting in the most unpredictable, irrational, stubbornly human way possible. Dr. Jeho began preparing data packages to send to every human military unit. I'm transmitting all the convergence research to our fleets. Every captain needs to understand that their emotions, their illogical decisions, their willingness to sacrifice everything for abstract concepts like honor or love. These aren't flaws to overcome. They're our most powerful weapons. As alarms began sounding throughout the ship, humanity prepared for a battle that every logical analysis said they could not win. But for the first time in galactic history, the approaching Devourers would face an enemy that didn't follow the rules. The battle for the galaxy had been raging for 3 weeks across 17 different star systems. Captain Lee Minho coordinated the human defense from the bridge of the Dokdo, watching tactical displays that showed something impossible happening. The Devourer fleet, which had destroyed every previous galactic civilization, was losing. Their formation is completely broken, reported Tactical Officer Shin Hyman, staring at her screens in amazement. They can't predict what we're going to do next, because we don't know ourselves. Dr. Kong Ji-ho, now serving as the fleet's strategic advisor, monitored the quantum consciousness readings from his mobile laboratory. The feedback effect is working better than I hoped. Every time they try to process human decision-making patterns, it creates chaos in their hive mind network. The turning point had come during the Battle of Nexus Prime, when Commander Oh Jin-wan led what should have been a suicide attack against the largest Devourer ship. His vessel was loaded with unstable convergence technology that would destroy both his ship and the enemy vessel. But instead of approaching with grim determination like a logical military sacrifice, Jin-wan had spent his final minutes laughing and telling jokes over the communication system. His last transmission before impact was a funny story about his grandmother's terrible cooking and how he would finally have an excuse to avoid family dinners. The paradox of facing death with joy instead of fear had created a cascade failure in the Devourer consciousness network that controlled their entire fleet. Commander Park, what's the status on the Western Battle Group? Minho asked over the intercom. The Devourers are retreating from System 7, came the reply. Lieutenant Choi decided to attack their flagship by flying in a spiral pattern while singing old pop songs. The enemy ships just stopped working properly and started flying into each other. All across the battlefield, human tactics that made no logical sense were proving devastatingly effective. Pilots who should have been terrified were cracking jokes. Soldiers facing impossible odds were making emotional decisions based on protecting strangers they had never met. Engineers were building weapons that shouldn't work according to any known physics, but functioned perfectly because they believed they would. Long-range sensors are showing massive movement in the Devourer fleet, reported sensor specialist Lee Ji-hoon. They're running away through the bridge windows. Minho watched as the dark shapes of enemy ships began disappearing one by one, retreating back toward the empty space between galaxies. The creatures that had consumed for previous galactic civilizations were fleeing from humanity's chaotic resistance. All ships, this is Admiral Park, came the transmission from Fleet Command. Enemy forces are in full retreat. I repeat, the Devourers are withdrawing from galactic space. The bridge crew erupted in celebration, but Minho felt overwhelmed rather than victorious. They had won a battle that every logical analysis said was impossible to win. 6 months later, Administrator's Song Minji stood in the same observation deck where she had first learned about the convergence. But everything had changed. The massive space station buzzed with activity as ships from dozens of different species arrived daily. The returning delegations are calling us the Paradox species, said Ambassador Kong Sunyun, humanity's first official representative to the reformed galactic community. He carried reports from alien governments that had been hiding in other galaxies for 2 centuries. They still don't understand how we won, Song Minji replied, watching through the viewport as human and alien engineers worked together on construction projects. Honestly, I'm not sure I understand it either. The alien scientists are fascinated by our brain patterns, Sungyin continued. Apparently, our ability to hold contradictory ideas simultaneously, to make decisions based on emotion rather than logic, to sacrifice ourselves for abstract concepts. They're calling it productive insanity. Through the station's corridors, the sounds of multiple languages and different types of music created a chaotic symphony. Former convergent species were returning to find that humanity had not only survived the Devourer attack, but had begun rebuilding the galaxy using a mixture of advanced alien technology and human creativity. The Zephyrian delegation presented us with their historical archives yesterday, Sungyin said, pulling up holographic displays. They've been keeping detailed records of galactic cycles for over 2 million years. According to their data, this is the first time in recorded history that any species has successfully fought off the Devourers. What makes them think we can do it again when they return? That's the interesting part. Their consciousness experts believe that human cognitive patterns might have permanently damaged the Devourer hive mind. The feedback loops we created during the battle may have made them unable to process any form of chaotic consciousness, not just human thoughts. From her office window, Song Mingi could see the construction of humanity's first galactic embassy. Earth had become the unlikely capital of a new kind of galactic civilization, one built on the principle that differences in thinking were strengths rather than weaknesses. Administrator Sungyin said quietly, "There's something else. The returning species want to establish a permanent defense alliance with humanity as the military leaders. They're asking us to become the galaxy's protectors." Song Minji smiled, thinking about how strange it was that humanity's greatest weaknesses had become their most valuable contributions to galactic civilization. I suppose someone has to be ready in case those things decide to come back. Outside the station, ships from hundreds of worlds worked together to build something new. The galaxy that had once fled in terror now looked to humanity for protection, and the chaotic, emotional, beautifully irrational human species had found their place among the stars.